Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. We're going to be talking about how do you sell in a service-based business. In my experience, there's been a lot of different ways to sell. And a lot of times people, when they hear sales, they get icky or they think it's going to be restrictive. So I'm going to outlay the truth for you. So before we get into that, if you're in the service-based business, please tune into the show. We're going to be dropping at least 2 podcasts a month. And we want to deliver as much value as possible for those in the service-based business. So the way you can help us is by sharing the show, and commenting and liking will help us grow the show. We want to help as many people as possible in the service-based business. So thanks for doing that. Subscribe before we dive into it, please. Thank you. So a lot of times sales, right? As soon as people in the service-based business hear that, they freak out. Personally, for me too, when physical therapists hear it, they're like, I don't want to sell. I'm a PT. People just come to me. I don't have to sell anything. It's not worth it. It's not something I have to do. The reality is you are always selling. So we're going to dive into the specifics of sales in service-based business, especially because there is a line you have to walk, right? You are building a relationship and a rapport with someone. So you have to make sure you're selling ethically and appropriately. So before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience in sales. Before I was a PT, I used to be a personal trainer, and I've worked in a ton of gyms throughout my career. One of the gyms I worked in was like a big corporate gym. Now I'll tell you my experience there and what they made sales feel like. So when you're a trainer in a big corporate gym, it's all about numbers. And listen, I get it. I'm a business owner. You have to track metrics. You have to look at that. But the corporate gyms, corporations in general really don't care about anything but the numbers. It actually gets not personal, so it gets thrown to the wayside. So what they did was they would give you a list and they would tell you, you have to reach out to X amount of people per day and you have to book this many people and then you have to sell this many people. Now, traditionally, this is a traditional sales role. That does happen. But specifically for this gym, they put pressure on you to make sure you did that. What happened with us was they would give you your numbers and they would say you got to call these people and bring these in. And if you didn't, you would lose your job. So for me, I didn't have the confidence back then to actually be doing sales. I didn't know what my value was, what value I brought to the game, what value I brought to the system. And I was just fearful. I was fearful when I was doing these assessments. I remember I had zero experience with sales, but I remember one specific example was I took someone through a free evaluation where you try to upsell them to join the gym and join training. And they give you like a script, but truthfully, they didn't even train me well enough on it. So here I am putting this guy through an assessment. And then in the whole process, I'm almost like trying to not get him to buy, or I felt uncomfortable when I knew I was going to ask him like, hey, the next step is for you to buy this package to get you to your goals. Reflecting on that now, it's not the right way to think about sales. And we'll dive more specifically into that. But back then, and probably a lot of you too, feel that sales is pushy. When you think of sales, you think of someone who is a pushy car salesman. That's what happens there. So I had this one client where I was taking him through an assessment. And I remember specifically at the end of it, I had to sell him and be like, you have to buy a 10-pack or a 20-pack or whatever it was at that point. And I just didn't have the confidence to deliver the quality that I needed to, or I didn't have the confidence to know that what I was bringing to the table was worth it. Sales really comes down to value and the worth you hold. That's really what sales is. And sometimes I wonder if the actual verb of sales is really what turns people off, but it's important. You sell each other every day. You know, my wife and I'm selling her every day on the idea of me, right? Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. But the truth is you're always consistently selling your value. And there's ways to make sure that your value is high level and it starts with you. So I'm going to jump into some points here. The first point, know and trust your value. Sales is a value exchange, right? So I'm going to deliver this and you're going to get this. And you have to really think about it that way. It's not just a transaction. You're actually delivering value. If you do not know and trust your own value, you're never going to be able to persuade someone to know and trust your value as well. Let's use that personal training example. If I had true belief that the value I had was knowledge, that I can get them to their goals, and I spoke with conviction, and I trusted that I can get them there, it would have been an easier persuading factor rather than a hard sell. Because the reality is, you want to make sure that what you are delivering is the best of your ability. And you have to trust that and know that yourself. So that's the first step. No one trusts your own value. Do not downplay your own value because people will feel that. And if you have any lack of confidence in that area, you need to make sure you work on that. And we could talk specifically about that too. Like, how do you work on your own value? Like, know that you have the knowledge. Work on yourself. Like, write down what you know. Write down how you can help people. Write down your values and how you want to help people. Because in the end of the day, especially if you're in the service-based business, we're really helping people more than anything else. It's not just, hey, this is a service. It's like, no, we're trying to help people. So know your value. The second thing when it comes to sales is you want to make sure you're being authentic in yourself. People can fully feel when you're trying to persuade them and push them over the edge to do something that isn't aligned with you. And I have specific examples of this where I would try to learn these sales courses or learn how to do sales. And the reality was, through learning that and trying to do the tactics of someone else, I wasn't being authentic to who I was. Being inauthentic really is, they're going to feel that. Every one of your customers is going to feel if you're lying to them or you're just trying to persuade them for a sale. So you have to truly be yourself and know that what you are delivering, you have full confidence in, and that is you, because that comes across strong. Like, if I'm here and I'm, even in this podcast, if I'm not myself, you guys feel that. So the reality is you have to be authentic because people will feel that and they'll start to know you, like you, and trust you. At the end of the day, this is the other side. If you're authentically yourself and you know you delivered to the best of your ability and someone doesn't want to buy it, that's okay. You have to accept that as well. That's an important aspect of sales too. You also have to understand, in the service-based business, you are the professional. You're not just someone there to deliver a service that they can just go on Google. And a perfect example of this is someone in my world in physical therapy, where you take them through an assessment and they're like, oh, I could just do these exercises at home. But the reality is you need a professional to take you along that journey, to guide you from point A to point B, to make sure you're getting better, to make sure you're progressing. The same is true with personal training. The same is true with massage. All service-based businesses are the same. We're not just doing a one-shot thing. It's a process. And we need to make sure that we're delivering that process efficiently because we are the professionals. People, if your client or your potential client comes into you and they seem to know a lot, don't forget that you are the professional. You are entrenched in this education. You have a lot more knowledge than you think. So don't downplay that. The other aspect of being authentic too is make sure that your end goal is to truly help someone. Don't go into a service-based business just thinking you're going to make money. You actually have to want to help people. That is the key ingredient to service-based business. If you're not there, let's use the physical therapy example. If I'm not there to make sure that someone could play with their grandkids and I'm only there to make sure that they come in and get visits, there's going to be a total disconnect. So you have to make sure that you're aligning your goals and your visions to what theirs are. And at the end of the day, that's to help them and make sure that they're doing things that they want to do in their life, that currently they're inhibited or there's restrictions. Our goal is to make sure that they're better. It's not just to be transactional. Remember that. Another aspect of sales in a service-based business, and I see this neglected a lot. I actually had a conversation with someone about this the other day. When someone is in your world, or let's say they come into you for a first session, you have to make sure you're booking the next session that day. And yes, this is very tactfully, but don't let them leave without booking the next session. If you do that, they're going to have time to go home and think about it. They're like, oh, I feel fine. I don't need this. I don't necessarily want to pay for this. So it's very tactful. You have to make sure you're booking the next session ahead of time. Get them on the calendar, get them committed, get a verbal commitment, and then get it on the calendar so that it's on their calendar as well. If you don't do that, there's going to be a disconnect from that first session, especially if your first session is a complimentary one. If it's free or complimentary, they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is all I need, or I could start to work on my own. If you're not booking that second session, then they're not going to see the value, or they're going to say, hey, they already told me everything, I don't need it. You have to be the one that guides them and say, listen, this is the process. You're going to need this next session to make sure we really work on this. It's not going to get better in one day. But don't let them leave your facility without booking that second session or even a third. Or if it is a program, ideally you book them out for a full program. That is the ideal situation in any service-based business where you're like, hey, we need to be here once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. Whatever the process is, you're prescribing and booking it that day. Because if you give them any time to think about it, especially if it comes down to them saying they don't have money, they're going to lose trust with you. And I'm sure this has happened to people out there where you go to a place, you have a service, especially a service. You go to a service and it was a great service. Like, let's just say a massage. I'm just throwing that out there as an example. You go to a massage therapist, it's a great service. They tell you, hey, you really need to come once a month. I know I've done this. At the end of the service, I'm like, oh, I'll book online or I'll do it later. You know what happens the majority of the time? I would say about 70% of the time, I don't book. I don't rebook there. They have to really follow up with me. So if I'm on the other side of that, I'm making sure that they're booking, because then I know that they're going to come in, they're committed, and I could truly help them get to where they need to go. The last point I want to bring up is this is not sales. You're a professional, right? If you bring your car to a mechanic and you know nothing about cars, they're going to tell you, hey, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You're just going to say, okay, let's fix it. Or even a better example, because now I have animals, right? I have a cat and a dog. If I bring my cat to the vet and they're like, hey, we need to do this, this, and this because it may be this, this, and this, I'm just going to say, yeah, of course. Like, let's take care of it. Let's find the root cause of it, because I trust that they are the professionals. Now, you have to believe that you're the professional, and when you prescribe certain things to people, you have to trust in that prescription. And then the more conviction you have, the more likely they are to stay on course. That's a big aspect of it too, conviction. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, how are you convicted, or how much conviction do you have is going to take things over the edge? A lot of times people, and again, this doubles down with being a professional. A lot of times people, when they go to the end of a sale or really to close a sale, they don't tell them with complete conviction, like, hey, that's going to be 200 a session. You need 8 sessions. They wishy-washy, like, hey, it might be 200 a session. Is that okay with you? Like, you're asking questions. You're asking for permission rather than recommending what you as the professional needs to recommend. I would say by you not doing that, you're actually doing a disservice to them. You have to make sure you're coming in and delivering exactly what you think they need to get to their goal. Because if not, then what is it? They're going to be back to you in a couple months, regardless of the service you're in. Deliver with conviction what you think they need, and then close it right there. Let's book your session. Let's go. And I want to just, recap a little bit on this. Let's talk a little bit about knowing your value. I think this is the most important part. So this was our point 1 with sales. It's funny because when you think about sales, you're like, oh, there's tactics, there's ways to do it. There's specific words I have to say. And yes, they can be factors in sales, but the reality is, know your value. You have to believe in your own value, because if you're not believing in your own value, how can you get someone else to believe in what you believe? So know your own value. Know that you are the best at what you do, and you got to consistently work on that. And it comes with time, but consistently start there. Know your value and be able to sell. Period there. Second thing, be authentic. People always want to follow someone who's authentic rather than someone who's fake all the time. A good leadership coach I follow, Greg Groeschel, talks about it all the time. People want to follow an authentic leader rather than someone who's not authentic or truly themselves, even if that authentic leader can be wrong sometimes. People want to know that you're not lying to them. So be authentic. Always book your next session. Don't let them leave without booking the next day. Or have like a verbal commitment is the minimal thing that you can have. You got to have it on paper. You got to have it on your calendar. You got to have it on their calendar. That's rock solid. And then be the professional. Put yourself out there. Know that you are the professional in this exchange. So your recommendation really is important. They're coming to you seeking advice, and you're giving your professional advice. And then it's up to them to follow. And yes, listen, like some people, especially if you are cash pay or you're in a service-based business that is only not through insurance and it's all money exchange, some people will say no, and that's okay. It's also something that you have to learn that, hey, I'm going to put my best foot forward, try to deliver the best value I can. And if someone says no, that's up to them. And that's their choice at this point. So if you got any value from this, please share the show, like, comment. We're trying to grow this. We're trying to help service-based businesses. I think that small business really is the cornerstone of this country, really. So I want to help as many people as I can, and we'll grow together. So share the show, like, comment. Thanks for watching.